Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Economics Design Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Michael Lee, Director of Corporate Development at Com2uS. Com2uS is a global game development and publishing company best known for their Summoners Wars games. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, Michael.
Yeah, Kiefer, thanks for having me.
All right, let's get into it. So to start us off with, could you provide a little bit of context about yourself and a little bit about your role at Com2uS?
Yeah, so hey everyone, my name is Michael Lee. I'm the Director of Corporate Development, as Kiefer mentioned. So my role consists of looking into opportunities of mergers and acquisitions, M&A, investments, and partnerships. I also work very closely with the X+ side, which we'll get into on the Web3 front, and help them out with the ecosystem development and business development as well.
Love that. So obviously, Com2uS is a pretty sizable company. It's been around for about 25 years now. And so given all that history, could you give the audience a little bit of background about the history of Com2uS and a little bit about some of the more recent motivations for moving into the Web3 space?
Yeah, so this will be very helpful for your listeners, our listeners. Com2uS started out actually in 1998, so it's considered one of the first mobile gaming companies in the world. And back then, mobile devices that were available were the feature phones, and obviously not the high-powered smartphones that we have nowadays. So in order for us to deliver games or create games and have users, experience them, we had to work with individual telcos like the AT&Ts, the Sprints, the Verizons, etc. And it was only when the App Store came around, I believe that was around 2007, when our business really started taking off. So, when the App Store came around, which was the ultimate the disruptor in distribution, all of a sudden, instead of working with the numerous telcos, we, worked directly with Apple and then Google, of course. And, we were one of the first to do, as I mentioned, we were one of the first to do mobile gaming. Then we were one of the first to do games on the App Store. And then we were one of the first to also do free-to-play as well. So there were these transition phases that we went through. And then our company really started growing exponentially when we launched our hit title called Summoners Wars Sky Arena. And that came out in 2014. And so it's very gearing up to be close to 10 years now, our 10-year anniversary. But this title has done over $3 billion in revenue, and it was also an influence for a lot of very well-known titles such as Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, Marvel Strike Force, Epic 7, etc. And as we kind of grew and went onto different fronts and innovated, I would say we kind of had that in our DNA as a company. As I mentioned, one of the first mobile gaming, one of the first free-to-play. And when we saw Web3, it really made a lot of sense for us, given the kind of games that we created and the collectible games that we created. And so, as we move on, of course, we're not quite there yet where you can get assets from one of these games and play it. Interoperability is a buzzword, which is used a lot, and that's not quite possible yet. But we see a future where that could potentially be the case, given the continuous titles that we churn out with Summoners War IP. We have the Summoners War Sky Arena, which is the original. We have Lost Centuria. We have Chronicles. And we're going to continue to build out that IP and that ecosystem where, in the future, who knows, where utilizing Web3 technology would be able to allow us to bring in assets from different games to be able to continuously play. But also, on top of that, with Web3, just the fact that the ownership aspect of it, given that our games are very collectible oriented, just made a lot of sense. And so that was our kind of journey into the space, along with us really having the DNA of being the first mover in this industry.
I love that as a company, you took that motivation to keep innovating and didn't give up on it. You found that success multiple times, and instead of thinking, okay, we found something that's successful, let's just double down on what we're doing already and be happy with that. You're still willing to take those risks and continue going into new directions. I love that. And also on the topic of interoperability, I want to do a clarifying question there because obviously there's a lot of components of that in terms of the technical side and the actual like economic feasibility side of that. So I'm curious if when you're thinking about that as a potential future direction, if it's mostly focusing on interoperability between games within the Com2uS ecosystem, or if you're considering potentially any interoperability between games, items in games that are outside of the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I think it'll be very difficult to consider games outside of the ecosystem, and even within the portfolio of games that Com2uS has, which is over 500 titles. It's going to be hard, as you mentioned. The economic side of it's when you bring in items that have attributes to it and metadata associated to it. It's very difficult to kind of bring that in and make it work in a different game as well. So I think, in my mind, what it looks like is it's purely cosmetic for now. Of course, as things grow and as we continue to innovate, maybe there might be ways to do some sort of crossover. But to answer your question, yeah, I think it'll start off smaller. So within like an IP universe, then potentially the Com2uS slate of portfolio of games, and then who knows what will happen afterwards. But I also want to also make be pretty quite frank about our approach as well. Gaming it's so hard to make a successful game, and right now, especially in the mobile side, there's so many titles out there, and so it's another reason why we're also doing Web3 is because the market is so saturated too, and we need to continue to innovate and push the envelope, move things forward to keep on staying relevant and to keep retaining the users that we have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. So I guess on the topic of some of that past success, so Com2uS's Summoners War games have seen global success, and more recently there have been updates to incorporate those Web3 components into Summoner Wars Chronicles, specifically like the mileage shop. So I'd like to dive in a little bit on some of the details on how that works. So could you give a little bit of background about the mileage shop and the benefits that brings to players?
Yeah, sure. So before I kind of go into that, I'm going to give you some more context on how this was formed and the reason why certain things were architected in a certain way. So we have now created, I think, around 9 different games that have some sort of Web3 element to it. And each of those games have certain tweaks in terms of the tokenomics side of things, because we wanted to learn and we wanted to see what works and what doesn't work. We've tried the Axie model, and that didn't work for us. Basically, our thesis was, if there was an exciting game and we added the Axie model to it, would these Web3 players come in and transition into true players rather than just continue to extract from the economy? And that turned out, from that experiment, it turned out that, most of these Web3 players, so to say, didn't really transition into core gamers. And the definition of core gamer for us was, if they put back into the economy, whether it be using whatever they earned back into it or, making an in-app purchase and continuing on the game. And so, there were several iterations of these tokenomics with the games that we launched. And with Summoners War Chronicles, what we decided was that we needed to really set a very high play gate, because another issue was there was a lot of influx of players that came in with our early titles, and they kind of, given the extractive nature, they kind of ruined the economy of the game. And so in order for us to prevent that from happening, we did add a very high play gate. And what we mean by that is, with Chronicles, you have to play to a certain degree, and it's only certain items that can be traded within the in-game exchange where you can earn the kind of currency that you can to then be swapped into the token and whatnot. And so with mileage, with how the mileage shop works is there's 2 ways. You can truly just enjoy the game, and you can receive the free I believe it's called free Rahild, and you can convert that into mileage and then use it in the mileage forum, or you can purchase Expla and you can convert that into the other token that is within the Chronicles ecosystem, and then convert that into the mileage forum and purchase the exclusive items that are in there. And the purpose of this mileage shop is to really give the core users another avenue of enjoying the game. And so you can think of it as an add-on rather than a whole separate experience. It's for real true users who want to experience something extra to go ahead and do so. And we're trying to do that in a way that continues to make it fair rather than someone just kind of pouring in and trying to take advantage of everything. So even the items that are associated and are in the mileage shop, you can't just continuously buy. There are limits to it and whatnot.
Yeah, having those limits is definitely a really important component of the economy, and something that is definitely a shift in thinking for a lot of studios that are moving to Web3, where now when you're thinking about how you're targeting pricing to certain players, it's no longer thinking about how are you setting primary market pricing. It's okay, how are you setting supply to impact secondary market pricing, and how will that impact how approachable that is to certain subsets of players.
Yeah. So
yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, with our titles currently, we have not implemented NFTs, and the reason is very intentional. We believe that there needs to be much more research and studying done on the NFT side, especially if they are going to have some sort of attributes to them, then they need to really be thought out and well architected. And this is why right now, even with Chronicles, it's just a token economy that we've kind of implemented.
Yeah, great clarification there. And so with some of these components, as you go through the process, you did a really good job of explaining it, but there's still components where it might seem like a bit higher complexity than what players might be used to. Any kind of tips there or things that you've learned on how to actually convey these things to a more traditional user base?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I'll be first to admit, it is not a great user experience as it is currently. And not only that, it was difficult for a time being because Apple and Google this was when we first started out, their guidelines were more conservative, and they did not allow us to really talk about Web3 within the games itself. And so all of the messaging was separate. No one really knew it if you just played the game about Web3, unless you're following Twitter, unless you're following XSplit and whatnot. But now they've kind of loosened it up, and we're starting to put more guides in within the games as well, not intrusively, but just if people are interested. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like the experience of the users to go ahead and try to take advantage of this and experience it is very difficult, and that is something that we are working on, and that is something that we are looking into with other partners as well, because I think that's the biggest point right now. We see a vast drop off. We have obviously a large user base, but there's a huge drop off in terms of the users converting into Web3 in terms of getting wallets and putting in and purchasing XSplit to take advantage of the mileage shop. And so we believe a lot of that has to do with the experience. Just think about it, right? On the Web3 side, this only applies to the Web3 folks who want to experience that aspect of it. Let's say you've hit all the requirements in terms of like the play gate, and you want to try and experience this and purchase XSplit. You have to go to a centralized exchange. You have to create an account. You have to first of all, you have to find a centralized exchange that will sell XSplit. Then you have to find it, then purchase it, then send it to the wallet, then convert it again within the game, and then now you're able to use it. That's like already way too many steps for anyone to continue to follow on, and it's tough. But the fact that people are doing it is a great sign. There are people who are going through those hoops to take advantage of this, and I think that goes that speaks to the game itself, and how fun the game is, and how much more these users want to experience an extra layer of the game itself. And so, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but first and foremost, the game needs to be compelling enough for users to even take those steps to try and experience it.
Absolutely. You've already given some really juicy tidbits for other people building in Web3 right now, but are there any other lessons that you'd like to share that could be taken from your experience with Summer's War Chronicles or any of the other games that you guys have been working on in Web3?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, the user experience is a big one, right? And so that's something we've learned many, starting from the first game. We're continuing to learn. We think that if that user experience flow can be a lot simpler and user friendly, then there will be more and more conversion. And it's also because we've been in this business for so many years, and these companies, our mobile gaming companies, have perfected the funnel, right? And now all of a sudden they need to re-perfect the funnel using Web3. And so, I believe we'll get there, and that is a learning point that we've definitely accepted. Another thing is that there needs to be, it seems like, at least from our learnings, the why needs to be very clear. Like, why should users even want to experience it? Why should users even want, have to buy this and go into the, like, what's gonna push them? What's gonna draw them? And so the reason why I think this works for Chronicles is because there are items, there are different, points for the users to get something different than other users in the game, right? And so exclusive items like, we have the maximization marble, the blessing marble, legendary scroll, mystical scroll, those are only available through the mileage shop. And because we allow that, then, because it's architected in that way, then it incents users to try and experience that. But of course, we don't want to just cut off users and have only Web3 users be able to experience it. Like, anyone who plays the game enough can, end up experience this level, because we want to reward users that are true users, gamers, right? And that's the whole point is we want to enhance the experience of the gamers that we currently have. And yeah, that's another takeaway is, there definitely needs to be something that will incent the users and really get them excited on taking that next step.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense there. Some great tips. And so maybe shifting over a little bit to the topic of monetization. And so want to get your thoughts on how does this shift to Web3 impact game monetization? And are there any particular Web3 monetization strategies that you think are going to be most likely to succeed? Because there are a lot of different tacks that people are taking, and I know you specifically mentioned so far focusing more on the token side than doing things with NFTs.
Yeah, I think the approach. So like let's take for example like Web3 monetization, right? During the whole Web3 bull run, as people say, the strategy was doing a PFP drop and monetizing in that way and building a community out that way, and then starting the game and getting people invested into the game in that way. So when we first saw that, we were to be frank, we were very kind of surprised, because that kind of flips the whole model of free to play on its head. And for a while there, that's how things were going, and it looked like that was the right way because everyone was doing it, everything was selling out, and everyone was getting very excited. But it turns out, as time went on, and as the winter kind of crypto or Web3 winter kind of came on, the people, the community that was very excited about it were speculators. Were there to earn rather than enjoy the game itself. Of course, there may have been some few that were mixed and wanted to earn plus play the game, but a vast majority of them were speculators. And so this kind of solidified our position in our thinking of that. Wow, okay, we were right in that that was not a sustainable model. Maybe it might work in the future. Maybe who knows? But at least at the time, we felt like we were vindicated in a sense that that's not the right way to do it. However, I think as the approach that we're taking is making it so that the users, it's not a totally different way to monetize. I think it's very important to continue, at least from our perspective, to have the strong monetization in-app, Web2 in-app purchases monetization aspect, because you want to continue to keep the game running. You can't got to service the game. Let's be real here, right? And however, if our approach being that we're adding another layer to it and an enhance in the gameplay experience, we think is the right way to kind of, I guess, not it's not really monetization, but it's more like a retention mechanism that doubles as monetization as well, because then organically, if people are more and more interested and invested in the game, it will kind of be a virtuous cycle in that users will continue to want to experience the game at a certain level and continue to convert and play utilizing the different economy layer that there is. Of course, they'll have to be a core gamer, but that's how we see it. And that's it's a very, very nuanced take, but during the time there, P2E, play to earn, was big, but we here call it play to own. And it's from a foundational level, it could be very similar because you are earning something, but the reason why the nuance is a little different, because it's not like you're playing to earn, but you're playing and you happen to receive something which you own, is the difference in nuance here. And so, there are several ways that we try to make this happen. One of them is the dynamic, reward allocation system, is to, reward users with tokens as they contribute in game. Another one is the gameplay gated rewards, which is, as I mentioned, you got to be at a certain level, or we gate the economy at a certain level so that the users can't extract too much and ruin the economy. And then there's the dynamic token conversion system, which we can get into a little later, where another thing we experienced was, Web3 users, them being very savvy with trading. When we first introduced Expla into connecting that with an in-game currency directly, we experienced arbitrage. And that was the first time, when the price of one thing came down, all of a sudden this value went up. And so they would, one way, it would kind of, spook the trading in one way, in one direction, and kind of push things up. And so that's why Exilium exists, because that is the intermediary to manage the arbitrage. And so, just to kind of go back, it's a long-winded answer, but to go back to monetization on the Web3 front of things, we haven't really considered it separate monetization, but more so as a retention play, because we want to continue to have a relationship with the users and make it feel like there is something extra that they can experience. And then, of course, as a byproduct, the monetization comes in.
I think that's really healthy to think about it with a retention-based focus, because I think a lot of the earlier, more play-to-earn types of strategies were using Web3 components as a little bit more of a user acquisition strategy. But the problem there is thinking about, okay, what types of users are you actually bringing in that process? And they're not going to be your target core gamers the vast majority of the time. And so then thinking of it a little bit more as something this is how you're going to retain those users, and thinking about the psychological benefits that ownership might have, and just the new kind of strategies that can be implemented there. So I think, the retention focus is a good one to have there. And so you're obviously repping Expla right now. For those just listening on Spotify, Michael's got the hat going, got the background going. And so would love to chat a little bit about that side of things. And so Com2uS is a Genesis contributor to the Expla blockchain, which is within the Cosmos ecosystem. So maybe you could give a little bit of background about Expla, and also maybe say a little bit about why assist with the creation of a new chain rather than building on one of the existing ones.
That's a very fair question. And, a lot of people may think the same exact way. What, you guys are a gaming company, developer / publisher. Why spread resources thin, and why work on some infrastructure project? The truth is, actually, and I guess it's been quite a while now, but we originally were built on a different layer one. We were built on a layer one called Terra. And for those of you who do not know, Terra was a top 10 chain, but ultimately went into a death spiral and just kind of died out within days. I won't go into details there. There's plenty of resources and articles on that online that anyone can look into. But we were the first major gaming company on Terra, and we set our sights on building there and building a blockchain gaming platform there. But because of that event where Terra kind of fell apart, we had to make a decision on whether to go to a different L1 or build something ourselves. Terra was built on Com2uS, and Com2uS is very, I guess, is developer friendly. And so when we met with all the other L1s, at the time, and this was when everyone was starting to talk about gaming. And so they kind of understood the impact that gaming would have on Web3, but they still didn't quite get it. And it was very clear with our conversations with all of them that they didn't quite get it. Plus, given the fact that they are an infrastructure provider, they're going to have to focus on so many different things, right? Like the finance, like DeFi, right? The NFT side, then gaming. Gaming is just like a section within the I guess the focuses that these other L1s have. And so we decided, look, we had already built so much on Terra, which was Com2uS based. And it turns out that it wouldn't take that much more of an effort to create our own. But at the same time, if we did, we would finally have the, help creating one. We'd have the keys to our destiny. We're a publicly listed company, Com2uS is, and, we're not going anywhere anytime soon. And so we felt it's a lot more safe to create this with other partners. And then, of course, the focus would be gaming. And so, given that the focus is gaming, everyone who builds on Expla are going to, they're going to likely have certain issues that one or the other, other parties may have had. And so it kind of becomes this group of, teams where it just kind of helps, push on the technological innovations as it relates to Web3 together. And so, yeah, that's the reason why Com2uS decided to be a Genesis contributor to Expla.
It's really exciting, and might be a little bit of a silver lining now that you got pushed by a bit of a tragedy in the space, and now hopefully that's putting you guys in a much better trajectory and helping a lot of other people in the ecosystem thrive as well by having a good dedicated place for building games on chain. And so kind of looking at where Com2uS stands in the overall market. So Com2uS really has global reach at this point. I'm curious to get a little bit of your perspective on the difference that you're seeing between gamers in different markets.
Yeah. So I think, when we first introduced our games, Web3 games, there were definitely a lot of new users, and we had high DAUs from a lot of Southeast Asian countries, a lot of Latin American countries. And I think part of it, because we had launched a few before the bull run ended, that contributed to a part of that. But at the same time, the games that we have really kind of, even though our company is a global company, our strength is in the mid to hardcore, the RPG, turn-based RPG, action RPG kind of games, and those games I would say tend to resonate more in Asia. That being said, we also did launch a hyper casual game that's being played all around the world, and I think those we're seeing. I would say still from our side, a vast majority are just normal gamers, Web2 gamers. The fact that we even have to say Web2, Web3 is kind of funny, to be honest. But that the vast majority of the users that continue to play our games are just normal gamers, and I think we're seeing some conversion there where people are taking interest into the Web3 side, of course, and our approach being, hey, here's another layer that you can experience if you're if you really enjoy this game. And I think that's seeming to resonate. But as I mentioned before, and as you kind of very poignantly pointed out, the user experiences, it needs to catch up there. And so, the differences we're seeing gamers in all these markets, I'd say, there's still, when we launch a title, there's still a lot of gamers, users that come from the Southeast Asia, Latin America areas. But at the same time, our company revenue makeup is very kind of equaled out. Like 30% comes from the North America, 40% comes from Asia, and then the rest come from Europe. And so we're still, as a makeup of our user base, it's still very much global company.
Mm-hmm. And so a follow-up to that, maybe thinking specifically about the reactions to that optional Web3 layer. Have you seen any particular trends on if you're seeing maybe Asian players being much more likely to jump on those Web3 elements versus more Western gamers? Have you seen any sort of trends like that?
Yeah, it's definitely more Asian gamers, and part of it has to do with the fact that the places, the exchanges that Expla is listed on is a lot friendlier to Asian, people in Asian countries. Just in general, U.S. citizens, it might be harder for them to get Expla versus someone in Korea or in Japan, say, and just because of that, that's a huge blocker for a lot of the folks that we're targeting as well. And so obviously that's due to regulations and just trying to play it safe, given we're a public company. But eventually, once Web3 is more and more adopted, I think, and as I mentioned, the user experience gets better, we're going to probably see an influx from all over.
Yeah, the regulatory side of it is definitely hair and bin space, and in the U.S. particularly, that is a little bit more difficult. And is that have you had to segment your strategy at all based on regulations in that sense? Like, do you have certain countries where you're just completely avoiding the Web3 components?
Yeah, so actually, we can't service Web3 games in Korea. And so, the Korean users that end up playing, it turns out, they probably VPN from somewhere, but, due to regulatory issues, we cannot service Korea. We're working, we have a very strong relationship with Oasis, which is another blockchain out in Japan. And we're working with them because we want to make sure we do things right in Japan on the regulatory front there. And so, we're making efforts into entering the Japanese market because Japan is being very open to Web3 and easing their regulation.
Okay, so going in a little bit of a direction, we've talked a little bit about some of the different genres. There's been a heavy focus on RPGs, and you also mentioned like a hyper casual game that we're developing there. And tying that towards the Web3 discussion, do you think there's any particular genres that you think provide the best opportunity to make a Web3 play with?
Yes, yeah. As I mentioned, I think definitely RPGs, hyper casual, because I think there's an opportunity there in terms of rewarding users with tokens, with some sort of ad watch. I think that's the kind of the meta now, so to say. I think a lot of companies are taking that approach. We also have a game like that called Mini Game Party that is taking that approach, where we award users with tokens. RPG, just because the ability to open up the economy, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think those two genres make a lot of sense in terms of Web3. But I think another subset is the risk, like skill base, right? Skill base, risking something. I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of Web3, and I think we're going to see a lot more innovation kind of happening there because it really does make a lot of sense in that front.
And so move forward a little bit. Got a fun one, hopefully. I'm curious if you have any hot takes about Web3 gaming. Feel free to push the envelope a little bit, poke the bear.
It's not a. I don't know if it's considered a hot take anymore, but it's most of the Web3 games I think are going to fail. That's my hot take. And that's including, us too. I'm not, I'm not saying the company is going to fail, but games, right? Like we have a lot of games that keep coming out. Even with us, more than 90% of our games fail. And that's just the nature of the game itself. But you add Web3 to it, it makes it even harder, is our opinion. Especially if you want to add a token element to it. That makes the level of difficulty in making a successful game even harder. And so you're already at 90% of your games failing, plus you want to add a Web3, element to it to make it even harder for yourself. I think my hot take is most of these companies are unfortunately going to go under. But the good news from that is because of that and because of people experiencing that and building and trying out new things, I think we're going to get more and more kind of innovation on the gaming side of things. It's unfortunate, but like at the peak of the quote bull market, you saw so many decks of Web3, not non-game developers, saying, hey, we're going to build a game within a year, not knowing how difficult it is to build a game. And not only that, not understanding how difficult it is to market a game. It's one thing to build a game, but it's a whole nother story to market the game properly so that it's played by millions of users, and I think that second segment is, so right now, the people building Web3 games, they've now understood that developing games harden itself. Before my corporate development role, I actually started off as a producer, so I know exactly how difficult it's so much work to create the game. Then you want to make the game successful, and that's even more work and even more dollars that you need to put into it. And that people, I don't think, quite have understood that yet. I think they're at the level of, oh shoot, it's really hard to make a game, but I don't think people have understood that, oh, now I have to, publish it, work with a publisher. That's where publishers come in, which I think is going to be very important. But I don't think people have quite understood that part. And so my hot take is most of these Web3 games are going to fail. That being said, I think we're going to learn a lot from it, and there's going to be a lot that we can take to kind of push on the next stage for innovation within games.
Yeah, I think that's a really good perspective to put out there in the space because I agree with it to a large extent there. And I think where that gets especially dicey is when it comes to having some of these teams having sold something to retail investors, because that's where that knowledge gap is especially large. Like if you're selling to people who have experience in the gaming industry, or you're selling to VCs where it's their job to take on those risks, I think that's a little bit different than if you're kind of selling, say, NFTs or a token to retail community members long before you actually have anything out there. And I think generally the space that it's been trending a little bit away from that very early sale before having anything tangible to show, which hopefully takes some of that risk away from those retail sales.
Another thing I want to add is I think the next sort of innovation isn't going to come. It's going to be something random. I think like something we just did not expect, and then that's going to kind of take life on its own, and everyone's going to try to dissect it and pull it apart and recreate it. But I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think the things that really leverage the potential of blockchain, and thinking about on-chain gaming and autonomous worlds recently, like that's an area where maybe we'll find some new grounds, new exploration around what gaming can become when you're adding in these on-chain components. So yeah, definitely a lot of interesting things that will hopefully be created in the future. And so got another question for you. On the topic of the future, like what are your expectations for what the longer term future of Web3 gaming looks like?
Yeah, this one. I mean, I've personally been thinking a lot on the expectations for Web3. Like, what should users what should it be? What should it look like? Like, what should gaming in general look like? Because once Web3 becomes widely adopted, it's not gonna no one's gonna call it Web3. It's just gonna be gaming, right? And so trying to put myself out there and think about what will people start to expect and what's going to become the norm in the future. I think I think there's going to be a lot of and this doesn't specifically tap on Web3 as the main component, but I think as more and more, we're seeing gaming companies in general being consolidated, right? Like the space itself is becoming the gaming space is becoming more and more consolidating. You saw that the Microsoft announced, the deal there, and that in Netflix coming into gaming, and then potentially Disney, I guess, also coming back in. What I think there's going to be, and gaming, fortunately for us, gaming is in the middle of all of that. And I think there's going to be a lot of experiences tied into gaming that wasn't before. So now you're going to see shows, TV, this whole transmedia play, but not separately, potentially something there where it connects, where you have to, be more immersed into the IP or watch the show to understand part of the game, to play the game, to then, something related to the movie, and then some physical good behind it. Especially, Disney is at a great place right now, given their assets of having, the theme parks and the shows and the IP. I think games kind of brings it all together. And I think Web3 has the potential to play a big role in that, in terms of the technology to take that experience to the next level. And what I mean by that is, there's going to be, I think as more and more people are spending time in the digital world, it's going to be very important for users to be able to trust what they have, and just make sure things are transparent. And of course, the average user, including myself, you're not going to go through transaction hashes and whatnot, but there will be experiences that allow us to accept life more immersed into the digital world. And I think that's the part where Web3 plays a big part in the future of where everything kind of connects, how I see it.
I love that vision. I think that's a really interesting one, of thinking about how so many different components of how people interact with entertainment can all come together. And looking forward to seeing some of that future come to light, and how Web3 might be able to fit into it. All right, we can wrap the podcast up here. Michael, thank you so much for coming on and all your insights.
Thanks, Kiefer. I love being on, and would love to continue the conversation sometime down the road. Maybe once more and more insights are found, and when Web3 is more mature, would love to have like a sequel to this, and share some insights there.
Absolutely. Thank you.